The cruelest thing about public humiliation is that it only takes one person to start it, and everyone else to silently enjoy the show. I should have turned around the second I saw Jason Carter standing beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Wellington Ballroom, holding a champagne glass like he owned the world. But I didn't. Maybe because after 3 years of rebuilding myself, I thought I was stronger than a memory. Maybe because the invitation in my purse had my name printed in elegant gold lettering, which meant I belonged there just as much as anyone else. Or maybe because I wanted to prove to myself that seeing my ex-husband again wouldn't matter. I was wrong. The charity gala was exactly what you'd expect from Manhattan's upper circle: tailored tuxedos, designer gowns, polished smiles, and the quiet competition of people pretending not to measure each other's worth. I adjusted the sleeve of my navy dress, took a slow breath, and stepped farther into the ballroom. That was when Jason saw me. His expression shifted almost instantly from surprise to amusement, the kind that made my stomach tighten. He leaned toward the woman beside him, a tall blonde in a silver gown who looked like she'd never heard the word no in her life, and whispered something that made her laugh. Then Jason started walking toward me. "Claire," he said, loud enough that nearby conversations softened. "Well, this is unexpected." I gave a polite smile. "Jason." He looked me over slowly, not with affection, but with the smug curiosity of someone inspecting a decision he once discarded. I didn't realize this event had opened up public registration. A few people nearby chuckled politely, uncertain whether they were witnessing a joke. I kept my voice even. "Good to see you too." His girlfriend tilted her head. "Wait," she said, feigning confusion. "This is your ex-wife." Jason smiled. "The one and only." She gave me a pitying look that somehow felt worse than outright rudeness. "Wow," she said. "You're brave." I almost laughed at that. "Almost. Brave?" I asked. Jason answered for her. "Showing up here. Considering." He let the word hang in the air, inviting others to imagine whatever version of me he'd apparently been sharing. I should have walked away then. Instead, I stayed. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," I said. Jason actually laughed. "Claire, come on." He gestured toward the room. "This isn't your scene." More eyes were turning now. People always notice tension faster than kindness. "Jason," I said quietly, "not tonight." But that only seemed to encourage him. "You know what I admire?" he said, raising his glass slightly. "Persistence. Most people would be embarrassed to show up where they clearly don't belong." The blonde laughed again, softer this time, but enough. My face felt warm, but I refused to let my voice shake. "You seem very concerned about where I belong." He stepped closer. "I just hate awkward situations." Then his expression changed slightly as he glanced past me. "Actually," he said with a satisfied smile, "looks like someone agrees." I turned. 2 security staff were walking in our direction. My heartbeat kicked harder against my ribs. Jason lowered his voice, pretending concern now. "You should leave before this becomes humiliating." That word landed exactly how he intended. Humiliating. As if I hadn't already endured enough from him years ago. As if standing here, surviving this moment, wasn't proof that humiliation no longer owned me. The guards came closer. Conversations nearby had nearly stopped. The blonde crossed her arms, clearly enjoying the spectacle. One of the security men looked between Jason and me with professional uncertainty. I reached for my clutch, suddenly wondering if there had been some mistake with the invitation after all. For one awful second, doubt slipped in. Then something strange happened. Across the ballroom, the event host looked up from a conversation, saw me, and froze. Completely froze. His expression changed so quickly it made my breath catch. Without saying another word to the people beside him, he started moving directly toward us. Fast. Jason noticed and smirked, clearly convinced he was about to be proven right. I almost believed it too. Then the host stopped in front of me, his entire posture shifting with visible urgency, and said words that made the entire moment turn on its axis. "Ms. Bennett," he said carefully, "they've arrived." Jason frowned so slightly that most people would have missed it, but I knew that expression. It was the look he wore whenever reality refused to match the version he had already decided was true. "They," he repeated, almost laughing, as though the host had simply confused me with someone else. The host did not even acknowledge him. His full attention remained on me. "Yes, Ms. Bennett," he said in a low, respectful tone. "They asked to be informed the moment you arrived." I could feel the shift in the room before anyone said a word. Not a dramatic shift. Not yet. Just that subtle social recalculation people make when uncertainty enters a story they thought they understood. Jason glanced at his girlfriend, then back at me. Interesting, he said lightly, trying to recover the performance. Looks like you know somebody. I almost answered him. Instead, I looked at the host. Thank you, I said. I will be there shortly. Of course. He nodded and stepped away, though not before giving the security staff a brief look that instantly sent them in another direction. Jason noticed that too. His smile tightened. Well, his girlfriend said, folding her arms, that was dramatic. Everything with Claire was dramatic, Jason replied. The irony of that nearly made me smile. If anyone had specialized in rewriting history, it was Jason Carter. Still pretending mystery makes you important? He asked quietly, stepping closer. That used to work better. I looked at him for a moment, seeing not just the polished executive in an expensive tuxedo, but every version of the man I had once defended, once believed in, once built a life around. You always did confuse silence with weakness, I said. His jaw shifted, just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me. Claire, he said in that controlled voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable in front of others. You cannot honestly expect me to believe you are suddenly part of this world. That word again. World. As though status were a private club and he had personally become its gatekeeper. His girlfriend smiled at me with rehearsed sympathy. No offense, she said, which of course meant offense was exactly what followed. But Jason mentioned you preferred simpler things. Jason chuckled. That is one way to describe it. I should explain something. Jason did not become arrogant after success. That would be the cleaner story. Easier to tell. Easier to forgive, maybe. The truth is more complicated. Jason had always wanted to be admired. Success just gave that hunger a nicer suit. When I met him, he was ambitious, sharp, and endlessly convincing. He could make delayed rent sound temporary, career uncertainty sound strategic, and self-centeredness sound like drive. We met in Chicago years before New York, before the polished version of him existed. I was 29, working long hours in consulting, living in a one-bedroom apartment that overlooked an alley and a brick wall. He was charming, restless, and full of plans. He said things like, "Give me 5 years," and somehow made you believe that time itself worked for him. I believed him. More than that, I believed in him. I was the stable one, the practical one. While he tested business ideas and chased opportunities, I paid bills when timing got tight. I reviewed proposals at midnight. I coached him before investor meetings. I introduced him to professional contacts I had spent years building relationships with. None of that bothered me then. Marriage is not supposed to be scorekeeping. Or at least that is what I told myself. The first time Jason landed a meaningful contract, we celebrated with takeout Chinese because that was what we could afford. He held my hand across our tiny kitchen table and said, "One day, I will make sure you never have to worry again." I remember believing every word. Success came slowly at first, then all at once. A partnership, a relocation, better clients, better suits, better apartments. Then Manhattan. Somewhere in that climb, gratitude became expectation. Support became invisibility. My contributions became part of the background, like electricity or running water, useful only when absent. "You worry too much," he would say whenever I raised concerns. This is how growth works. Then came the dinners I was not invited to. The business trips that extended for unclear reasons. The constant need to be admired by rooms full of strangers. I ignored signs longer than I should have. Not because I was naive. Because when you have invested years into a life, you become skilled at interpreting discomfort as temporary. The end was not explosive. That is another myth people like. No dramatic confrontation. No shattered glass. Just the slow realization that I was having conversations with a man who had already emotionally left the room months earlier. "I think we want different things," he told me one evening in our high-rise apartment, standing beside floor-to-ceiling windows like a man rehearsing a scene. "That is a very polished way to say you are leaving," I told him. He sighed, as though I were making things difficult. "Claire, not everything is betrayal." It was remarkable. Really, how often people define betrayal according to whether they are the one committing it. I found out about the other woman later. Not the one standing here tonight. Someone before her. Maybe others too. By then, details hardly mattered. The divorce was efficient, civilized, almost elegant from the outside. He was very concerned with appearances. People told me I handled it well. What they meant was that I handled it quietly. Jason assumed quiet meant defeated. That was always his blind spot. He measured outcomes by what he could see. If you were not publicly thriving, he assumed you were privately failing. You disappeared after the divorce, he said now, standing in front of me in the ballroom, as if continuing an old argument. Nobody heard from you. Not everybody broadcast their life, I said. No, he replied. Some people vanish. His girlfriend touched his arm. Jason, maybe we should get back. But he was invested now. Too invested. I just find this fascinating, he said. You show up here after all this time, act like you belong, and suddenly important people know your name? He smiled. You can understand why that seems unlikely. I met his gaze. Only if you assume I stayed exactly where you left me. Something flickered across his expression. Annoyance, maybe. Or uncertainty. He covered it quickly. Claire, he said, lowering his voice. Whatever performance this is, do not embarrass yourself. There it was again. That certainty. That assumption that he understood the story better than I did. The truth was, Jason had absolutely no idea what happened after the divorce. And that ignorance was about to become very expensive. If Jason had simply walked away at that moment, he might have preserved what was left of his dignity. But some people cannot resist one more performance when they believe the audience is still on their side. He smiled in that polished, executive way that looked convincing from a distance and said, Actually, Claire, before you disappear into whatever mysterious business you suddenly have, stay for the toast. His girlfriend brightened immediately, sensing another opportunity for entertainment. Around us, conversations had resumed, but not fully. Enough people were still watching to make this dangerous. I do not think that is necessary, I said evenly. Come on, Jason replied, already turning toward the center of the ballroom. It is for the children, after all. Charity has a wonderful way of making bad behavior look socially acceptable when dressed in the right language. A few guests laughed politely. Someone handed Jason a microphone as though this had always been the plan. I considered leaving. I truly did. But something in me wanted to see just how far certainty would carry him. Jason tapped the microphone lightly, earning attention across the room. Good evening, everyone, he said smoothly. I promise to keep this brief. That was a lie. Men who enjoy attention never keep things brief. The room quieted. Crystal glasses paused midair. Waitstaff slowed instinctively. Jason had always known how to command a room. It is nights like this that remind us how fortunate we are, he began, using the warm, practiced cadence of someone who had delivered versions of this speech before. To be surrounded by success, generosity, and people who truly belong in spaces where meaningful things happen. A subtle emphasis. Deliberate. A few approving nods. His girlfriend stood near the front, smiling like a loyal campaign surrogate. Then he glanced toward me, just long enough for the room to understand. And every now and then, he continued, life surprises us with unexpected reunions. Soft laughter. Old chapters reappear. More laughter now. My face stayed neutral, though I could feel the temperature of the room shifting towards spectacle again. It is funny, he said, shaking his head with manufactured nostalgia. How some people can mistake proximity to ambition for ownership of success. There it was. Cleaner than open cruelty. Sharper because it sounded sophisticated. A few people exchanged glances, uncertain whether to laugh harder or pretend discomfort. Jason smiled as though he had said something wise. But I suppose we all process the past differently. His girlfriend laughed first. Others followed. Not because it was particularly funny. Because crowds are often cowards in expensive clothing. I should have felt humiliated. Maybe part of me did. But something else had begun to replace that feeling. Curiosity. Because Jason was making a mistake so confidently that it had become almost fascinating to watch. He stepped down from the small platform and handed off the microphone, visibly pleased with himself. As he returned, he leaned closer and murmured, That was your chance to leave gracefully. You seem very invested in my departure, I said. I just prefer order, he replied. Unpredictability makes people uncomfortable. Only when they are not controlling it. His expression hardened for half a second. Before he could respond, movement near the ballroom entrance shifted the atmosphere. It was subtle at first. A quiet change in staff posture. Event coordinators suddenly speaking into earpieces. One of the servers nearly collided with another while looking toward the doors. Jason noticed it too. What now? His girlfriend asked softly. Then a woman in a perfectly tailored black suit crossed the marble floor with efficient purpose and stopped beside the event host. She said something too quietly for us to hear, but I caught 4 words as the host turned toward me. The board has arrived. Jason heard it too. I saw the exact second confusion replaced amusement. The board? He repeated, this time without confidence. The woman in black glanced directly at me, then gave the smallest professional nod, as though confirming timing. Jason looked at me, then back at her. Claire, he said carefully, what exactly is going on? I adjusted the clasp of my clutch and met his eyes without blinking. That depends, I said. How much do you think you already know? Jason stared at me the way people do when the rules they thought governed a room suddenly stopped making sense. His girlfriend, whose name I had still not bothered to ask, looked between us with visible impatience. Can someone explain what is happening? She asked. I am sure there is a simple explanation, Jason said quickly, though the certainty had drained from his voice. That sentence was never for me. It was for himself, for the audience, for the fragile version of control he was trying to reconstruct. The woman in black remained near the host, speaking quietly with other staff members now appearing far more alert than they had 10 minutes earlier. Guests had begun noticing the shift. Wealthy rooms are exceptionally sensitive to hierarchy. People can sense importance long before they understand it. Jason straightened his jacket. Claire, he said, forcing a calm smile. If this is some professional coincidence, congratulations. Truly, that word, coincidence. As though any connection between me and relevance had to be accidental. Thank you, I said. That is unexpectedly gracious. His jaw tightened. I am trying to be mature. That would be new. His girlfriend inhaled sharply. Jason ignored her reaction and lowered his voice. Enough. Interesting, I replied. That was my line an hour into our divorce discussion. He looked briefly embarrassed, but only because people were nearby. This is not the time. You are right, I said. Timing matters. The ballroom doors opened again, but not with dramatic flair. Just the quiet confidence of people accustomed to entering rooms where they are expected. Several executives stepped inside, all composed, all unmistakably senior, followed by a woman in her 60s with silver hair, sharp posture, and the kind of presence that makes introductions unnecessary. Jason noticed immediately. That is Margaret Holloway, he whispered, almost to himself. I knew that tone. Recognition mixed with ambition. Who? His girlfriend asked. He barely looked at her. Holloway Strategic Capital. His voice dropped further. This event is partly underwritten through their foundation partnerships. His girlfriend's entire demeanor changed. That sounds important. It was. Margaret had built a reputation for precision, discretion, and a near-total refusal to waste time on performative people, which meant she and Jason would likely dislike each other on instinct. The executives paused as the host approached them. There was a brief exchange. Then Margaret looked across the room, straight toward me. Jason noticed. Do you know her? He asked. Should I? I replied. Claire. His tone sharpened. Stop doing that. Doing what? Answering questions with questions. You used to do that when hiding things, I said. His expression darkened. That is unfair. Is it? His girlfriend stepped in. Jason, seriously, if this is some weird personal history thing, maybe we should just move. She was practical, I would give her that. Unlike Jason, she recognized unstable optics when she saw them. But Jason had already committed too much ego to retreat gracefully. No, he said. I want clarity. That has never actually been true, I replied. Before he could answer, the event host returned, visibly composed but notably deferential. Ms. Bennett, he said, they are ready whenever you are. Jason turned so fast, it was almost comical. Ready for what? The host blinked as though only just remembering Jason existed. Private reception coordination, he said carefully. Internal leadership matters. That phrase landed exactly how it sounded. Vague enough to reveal nothing. Significant enough to say everything. Jason recovered quickly. Oh. He nodded, smiling again. That makes sense. It did not, but confidence can imitate understanding for a while. Consulting? He asked me. Advisory work? I said nothing. Silence is useful when arrogant people need room to invent reassuring explanations. He filled the silence exactly as expected. That is actually impressive, he said. Really? His girlfriend brightened. See? I told you there had to be some misunderstanding. She absolutely had not. But narrative convenience is a social reflex. Jason leaned slightly closer. Claire, if you are doing independent consulting now, good for you. There was generosity in his tone now, but it was the kind that comes from believing you are still above someone. Thank you, I said again. You have said that twice, he replied. I am trying something new, I said. Margaret began moving through the room, exchanging brief greetings. People subtly repositioned themselves in hopes of proximity. Jason tracked every movement. If you know Holloway strategic, he said, that is genuinely useful. There it was. The pivot. Cruelty when he thought I was beneath him. Opportunity the moment utility became possible. Some habits survive every wardrobe upgrade. Useful for whom? I asked. He gave a small laugh. Come on, Claire. No, really. We are adults. Debatable. His girlfriend shifted awkwardly. Jason, he ignored her. Look, whatever happened between us happened. Ancient history. Amazing how betrayal becomes ancient history when the person benefiting says so. And, I asked, and if you have connections here, there is no reason to be hostile. Hostile. The word almost made me laugh. You publicly mocked me less than 15 minutes ago. That was banter. Security was approaching. A misunderstanding. Your speech. Taken out of context. I held his gaze. That was fast. Claire, this is business. Exactly. He exhaled, frustration leaking through polish. What are you actually doing here? I considered answering honestly. Instead, I chose precision. Working. His girlfriend frowned. As what? Not a guest, I said. That landed harder than expected. Jason stared. That does not make sense. That seems to be happening a lot for you tonight. He stepped back, studying me more carefully now, as if details he had dismissed earlier might suddenly reveal hidden meaning. The dress. The invitation. My calm. The fact that staff were not treating me like an accidental attendee. He was doing mental arithmetic, trying to solve a problem with missing variables. Good. Let him. The woman in black returned, this time closer. Ms. Bennett, she said quietly. There has been a slight adjustment to sequencing. Understood, I replied. Jason looked between us. Sequencing? She ignored him. Entirely. Margaret would like a brief word before formal remarks. Of course. She nodded and moved away. Jason's girlfriend stared openly now. Jason, who exactly is she? He did not answer because he did not know. That silence may have been the most honest thing he had offered all evening. Claire, he said finally, voice lower, less performative now. If there is something I should know. I looked at him and saw the first genuine crack in his certainty. Not humility. Not yet. Just destabilization. There is, I said. But not the version you think. He swallowed, subtle but visible. Then tell me. I adjusted my clutch and glanced toward the private reception corridor. I cannot, I said. Because I am not here as a consultant either. Jason looked at me as though language itself had become unreliable. If you are not consulting, he said slowly, then what exactly are you doing here? For the first time that evening, his voice carried something real. Not arrogance. Not mockery. Uncertainty. It suited him less than confidence, but far more honestly. Before I could answer, Margaret Holloway approached with the same measured composure she brought into every room. Even Jason straightened instinctively. Claire, Margaret said warmly, offering her hand. I was beginning to think Manhattan traffic had finally defeated you. Not traffic, I said. Just an unexpected reunion. Her eyes moved briefly toward Jason. She understood more in one glance than most people understood in an hour. Those can be educational, she said. Jason stepped forward immediately, extending his hand with polished efficiency. Margaret Holloway. Jason Carter. We have not formally met, but I have followed your firm's work for years. Margaret shook his hand because etiquette required it, not because interest did. Mr. Carter. His girlfriend suddenly smiled as though she had been invited into relevance by association. I am Savannah, she offered brightly. Margaret acknowledged her with a polite nod and returned her attention to me. That hierarchy landed hard. The board is ready, she said. We delayed formal remarks until you arrived. Jason blinked. Delayed. Margaret turned slightly, including him only because he was physically present. Timing matters in leadership transitions. Leadership transitions. I watched the words register without fully resolving. Jason looked at me. Claire. Margaret tilted her head very slightly. You have not told him? It has been an unusually theatrical evening, I replied. Margaret's mouth curved, with restrained amusement. So I gathered. Jason laughed once, short and uncertain. I am clearly missing context. Margaret studied him for half a second. Yes, she said simply. It was devastating in its simplicity. Savannah shifted closer to Jason, suddenly less confident. Jason, what is happening? He ignored her. Claire works with your firm? Margaret answered before I could. Claire does not work for us. Jason seemed relieved for exactly 1 second. Right. Then Margaret continued. We work with Claire. Silence. Genuine silence this time. Not social pause. Shock. Jason stared at me as though I had spoken a language he had never heard. I do not understand, he said. That is becoming a theme, I replied. Margaret checked the time discreetly. We should proceed. Jason took half a step forward. Wait. That single word carried more desperation than anything he had said all night. Claire. He looked directly at me now, no audience performance left. Tell me what this is. I considered making him wait longer. A less patient version of me might have enjoyed that. But truth, when timed properly, is more effective than cruelty. Do you remember the healthcare logistics platform your company has been chasing for the past 8 months? His expression changed instantly. What? The acquisition opportunity, I continued. The one your executive team has been positioning as transformational. How do you know about that? Savannah looked confused. Jason. He did not answer. He was already doing the math. That information is confidential, he said. Not to everyone. Margaret remained perfectly still beside me. Jason's breathing had changed, just slightly faster now. Claire. My name sounded different in his mouth now. Less ownership. More caution. The platform, I said calmly, did not begin as an acquisition target. His face lost color by degrees. No, it began as a restructuring project. No, built after Chicago. He shook his head. That is not possible. After the divorce, I said, when everyone assumed I disappeared. The silence around us deepened because people nearby had absolutely begun listening. Wealthy people may pretend not to eavesdrop, but they are exceptionally committed to hearing anything that affects power. You built Meridian? Jason asked, almost whispering. I held his gaze. Not alone. But yes. Savannah looked between us. What is Meridian? Jason did not answer because he could not. Meridian Health Systems had become one of the most aggressively watched private sector logistics platforms in healthcare infrastructure. Scalable, efficient, strategically positioned, and frustratingly difficult to access. Jason's company had spent months trying to position itself favorably for acquisition talks. He had likely spoken about it in board meetings, investor calls, and strategy sessions with the confidence of a man approaching opportunity. He had no idea he was speaking about my company. That cannot be true, he said. Your background is consulting. People learn. That scale takes capital. Margaret answered that one. It does. Jason looked at her. Your firm funded Meridian? Early institutional expansion, yes. And Claire is founding leadership. The phrase hit harder than a job title ever could. Jason's mouth opened, then closed. Savannah took a slow step backward. Smart woman. No. Jason said again, but weaker now. You never what? I asked. Asked your permission? He looked genuinely disoriented. You never talked about this. We were divorced. That is not what I mean. I know. He rubbed a hand across his jaw, trying to recover. This is insane. No, Margaret said mildly. It is actually very well structured. I almost laughed. Jason looked at me with something close to disbelief. All this time? Yes. And you said nothing? To you? I asked. Correct. Why? That question revealed more about him than any answer I could give. Why had I not informed the man who left me, underestimated me, publicly humiliated me, and assumed my silence meant irrelevance? Because my life stopped being your business years ago. Savannah finally spoke. Jason, is her company the deal you have been talking about? His silence answered for him. Her expression changed in a way I recognized immediately. Not sympathy for me. Recalculation about him. Jason noticed it too. Good. Claire, he said, voice tightening. If this is true, then tonight, yes? This affects major decisions. I am aware. Then why are you here like this? Like what? Unannounced. I was invited. Margaret handed me a slim folder. Updated briefing materials. Final approval language included. Jason stared at the folder as though it might physically explain reality. Final approval, he repeated. Margaret answered with her usual efficiency. The acquisition structure has changed. Jason went completely still. Changed how? Margaret looked at him with the neutrality of someone discussing weather. Your company is no longer positioned as acquiring Meridian. He swallowed. Then what is happening? I took the folder, met his eyes, and answered. Myself. A controlling merger structure. His face drained. That is impossible. No, I said quietly. Just expensive. Who approved this? He asked. Margaret glanced toward me. Founding leadership and strategic board consensus. He looked at me as though finally seeing a stranger wearing a familiar face. You? Yes. You would do this? There it was. The absurd moral outrage of someone comfortable with his own ambition but offended by mine. This is business, I said, repeating his earlier words exactly. That landed. Hard. Savannah stepped even farther away now, suddenly fascinated by a floral centerpiece. Jason lowered his voice. Did you plan this? Plan what? Tonight. This humiliation. I held his gaze. Jason, you humiliated yourself before you knew who I was. That was the moment something in him visibly collapsed. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way certainty leaves a person when denial becomes too expensive to maintain. Around us, whispers had fully begun. The same room that laughed with him earlier was now watching him differently. Social gravity is ruthless. Margaret touched my arm lightly. We should go. I nodded. Jason spoke one last time, softer than I had ever heard him. Claire. I paused. I really did not know. That, I said, has been obvious all evening. I stood there for one quiet second longer, not because Jason deserved more of my time, but because endings matter. People imagine justice as something loud. A dramatic speech. Public revenge. A perfect line designed to destroy someone in front of witnesses. But real justice is often much quieter than that. It is the moment someone realizes the story they told about you was never true. Margaret and I began walking toward the private reception corridor, and I could feel the room parting in a way it had not when I first arrived. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Respect has a different temperature than curiosity. Behind me, Jason said my name again. Not sharply, not arrogantly, just uncertainly. I turned. Savannah had moved several feet away by now, her earlier confidence replaced by the unmistakable discomfort of someone reassessing the person beside her. Jason looked older somehow. Not physically, just emotionally smaller. Claire, he said, if I misjudged you. I almost smiled at the precision of that phrasing. Misjudged. Such a polished little word for years of dismissal. If, I asked gently. He exhaled. I did. That was probably the most honest sentence he had spoken all evening. I did not know what happened after. No, I said. You did not ask. He looked down briefly. That is fair. Is it? I asked. Because fairness did not seem especially important to you earlier. He had no answer for that. Margaret remained beside me, patient but observant. Jason glanced toward the executives, the folder in my hand, the room now watching him with very different interest. Was any of this because of me? He asked quietly. It was such a revealing question. Even now, he needed to know whether he was central to the story. Some people never entirely outgrow that instinct. No, I said truthfully. That may be the part you will struggle with most. His expression shifted. Meaning my life became much larger when it stopped orbiting your opinion. Silence. Clean, direct silence. No cruelty required. He nodded once, though I am not sure whether he understood or simply had nothing left to say. I am sorry, he said. People think apologies automatically create closure. They do not. Timing matters. Intention matters. History matters. I believe you are sorry tonight, I said. That is not the same as understanding why. His shoulders lowered slightly. I did not stay to watch what that realization did to him. Some lessons are private, even when learned publicly. Margaret and I continued toward the reception room. As the doors opened, she glanced at me with quiet amusement. Unexpected evening. A little, I admitted. You handled it well. Years of practice. She smiled. Still, I imagined that was satisfying. I thought about the laughter, the security staff approaching, the speech, the assumptions. Then I thought about the truth. Not satisfying, I said. Clarifying. Margaret nodded like someone who understood the difference. Inside the reception room, conversations shifted toward numbers, governance, strategy, and decisions that would shape companies far larger than old personal history. Exactly where my attention belonged. And for the first time that evening, Jason Carter was no longer the most important person in the room. He had not been for a very long time.